Welcome to Great Events. My name is Abhijit Joshi. Before we proceed, everyone, please turn on your cameras. Let me introduce our moderator for today. He has been a Toastmaster for over 2 decades. Please help me welcome the two-time distinguished Toastmaster, Salazar Della Porta. Salazar, it's all you, sir.
Well, thank you, Abhijit. Abhijit, of course, is our Program Quality Director for District 101. And tonight, what we're going to do is talk about evaluation. One of the best ways we assist our fellow Toastmasters in Toastmasters is through our feedback to them based on their assignments. Tonight, the members of Peninsula Pros Toastmasters are going to share some of their tips and techniques for providing evaluations. Now, Peninsula Pros was chartered in 1991. It's been a breeding ground for the growth and development of many Toastmasters since that time. In his book, Personally Speaking, Dr. Ralph Smedley, the founder of Toastmasters, says that he created Toastmasters in order for us to provide audience feedback to our members. And the most important element of the speech is the reception of a speech by the audience. So no Toastmaster club is fulfilling its obligation unless it brings the maximum of evaluation to its members. So evaluation is not a whitewash. It's just a way of saying thank you for someone for presenting their material to us. And it's our audience feedback to let the speaker know what we received, what we heard, and what we felt about how they presented. Now, to get us started, let's meet the president of Peninsula Pros Toastmasters, Diane Baer. Diane?
Thank you, Salazar. Learning how to give effective evaluations is an important part of our Toastmaster journey. As Salazar mentioned, a constructive evaluation helps the speaker become a better speaker, helps other speakers become better speakers. We don't provide a whitewash full of platitudes. Instead, we give a responsible feedback that describes the speech's effect on the evaluator and how that speaker connected to the audience. At Peninsula Pros, one of the things we do is we focus on speech evaluations, which we believe is the best way to help our members, giving our insights on what they shared. As in all Toastmaster clubs, we give speech evaluations for every speaker, and we provide round-robin evaluations where every member and every speaker gets the chance to comment and interact. Tonight, some of the members of Peninsula Pros will share their insights on the topic of effective speech evaluations learned through our combined 200 plus years of Toastmasters experience. Let's take a look at the agenda for tonight. After my introductions of the upcoming speakers, we'll talk about what is evaluation, how is evaluation structured, advanced preparation for evaluation, and ideas for preparing and presenting evaluations. We'll have a practical demonstration. We'll have a speech from a guest speaker, followed by 3 speech evaluations. Yes, and that will be followed by each of them being evaluated by one of the members of Peninsula Pros. So an evaluation of an evaluation. We'll do a summary of some closing points to remember and then open it up to question and answers. Now, I have the honor of introducing our speakers tonight, listed here in the order they'll present. Salazar Della Porta, who you already met, has been a distinguished Toastmaster for a number of years and in Toastmasters since 1995, so over 27 years. He is the current A2 Area Director, the current Vice President of Public Relations, and a past President of Peninsula Pros. And some of his accolades include past Area Governor of the Year, past Division Governor of the Year, past District 4 Toastmaster of the Year, and past District 101 Toastmaster of the Year. Our next speaker is Arnie Buss, who joined Toastmasters in 1998, so 24 years plus. He is currently the treasurer of both Peninsula Pros and NPS, Naval Postgraduate School, Toastmasters. He was a district contest winner in the International Speech Contest, the Humorous Speech Contest, and the Evaluation Contest. He was a semi-finalist at the World Championship of Public Speaking. He's currently a research associate professor at the Naval Postgraduate School. He offers couples and individual classes in interpersonal communication, and he enjoys playing the violin. Next up is Tatiana Margolina. She joined Toastmasters in 2012, so 10 plus years now. She is currently the Vice President of Education at 3 Toastmaster clubs: Peninsula Pros, Salina Sunrise, and Speakeasy Monterey. She is a past Area A1 Director and past Division A Director. She's currently working on 4 different paths, and she's a Pathways Mentor Level 5. Carl Thormeyer joined Toastmasters in, drumroll, 1964. He has 58 plus years in Toastmasters. He is current club secretary and past president of both Peninsula Pros and Naval Postgraduate School. His accolades include past District 49 Secretary and Lieutenant Governor of Communications, past Area Governor and the original Division A Governor, past District 4 Parliamentarian for 15 years from 1995 to 2014. He is the past District 4 Golden Gate Award recipient in 2003, past District 49 Toastmaster of the Year in 1976, and he's working on presentation mastery and effective coaching and pathways. Wow, that's Carl. Next up is Carrie Glenn. Carrie joined Toastmasters in 2013, 9 plus years ago. She is currently the Area G1 Director. She is Vice President of Membership and a past president of Peninsula Pros. She is president of Speakeasy Monterey, currently Vice President of Public Relations for Naval Postgraduate School Toastmasters, and secretary for Carmel Improv. Where do you find the time, Carrie? She's currently active in 4 paths, and she goes by the nickname Swiss Army Knife of Entrepreneurs. Well, that's the cast for tonight. Let's get started with Solazar. He'll be talking about the evaluator's mindset. Solazar.
Thank you, Madam President. And I failed to talk about Diane Baer, who joined Toastmasters in 2013. She's actually a past area governor, past division governor, past president of Speakeasy Monterey, past member of the District 101 program quality team and club growth team, past vice president of education of Peninsula Pros, current president, and working on 2 paths, team collaboration, as well as presentation mastery. So since I chose not to do that earlier, I needed to do it now. But let's talk about mindset. Mindset is, what are you thinking? What are you thinking when you go in to do that evaluation? Is the evaluation about you? No. The evaluation is about the speaker. What are the speaker's goals? Have you talked to them in advance to get an idea of what they're working on? They're working on gestures. They're working on vocal variety. Are they working on presence on the screen? What are the goals of the speaker? What does the speaker, we evaluate what the speaker does and not who they are. It's not a question of we like the speaker or we don't like the speaker. It's a question of how can we support them in what they're attempting to do in their presentation? What do we see? What do we hear? What do we feel about what they presented? And it's also an excellent way for us to build our own presentation skills by building an evaluation. It's a mini speech. It has an opening, a body, and a conclusion. And the evaluation, once again, is about the speech, not the evaluator. We don't even have to like the topic. It's not a question of whether we like it or not. Now, we also take a look at what are the objectives of the speech as provided in Pathways. What are the guidelines? So we need guidelines that the speaker has been working on. Our mindset is, what are the guidelines? What's the speaker working on? Now let me listen. Let me hear how they chose to present this. And I got in trouble a couple of weeks ago at a different presentation where I said that to me, an evaluation is not about us being the expert telling someone what to do. If I listen to a presentation and I feel the speaker has done it completely, I may not have something that I suggest for them to do, not because I don't have ideas, but because I might think it's complete. But when I do offer suggestions, it's only because I think it might be better. It doesn't necessarily mean it's for their improvement. So I'm saying it once again so I can get in trouble twice. Always approach the speaker in advance to discuss the objectives of the speech and address any concerns. I might be concerned that I don't feel as comfortable with the material. I'm doing my research assignment and I looked it all up, but I'm not as comfortable. Find out what the speaker's intentions are. And then paying attention to their goals for self. I went backwards for self-improvement. Our mindset is one of the things that make our educational program unique. It's how we help our members improve. That's what our role is. We're providing audience feedback. We're letting them know how we received the speech, and we are letting them know if we thought something else could be done in a different way. The speaker knows they're listened to. They know that they're appreciated. And it also helps boost their confidence to try again, to do it again. Evaluations are the skill that we learn through participation, not by listening, but by doing. To take us to our next level, let's listen to Arnie Buss.
Thank you, Solazar. As Solazar was saying, it is all about the speaker, and because as the evaluator, you're part of this dynamic, it is important to personalize your language. What I mean by that is putting yourself in the position of the speaker when giving the evaluation. Now, ideally, if you're evaluating a speech project that you yourself have already given, then you can bring your own experience to that. But it's also important to recognize that how you approach the project is going to be different than how the speaker approaches the project. And so, therefore, do as Solazar said and make sure to connect with the speaker beforehand and make it clear what kind of additional objectives they might have. Now, when giving your evaluation, it's important to avoid you statements. And what's a you statement? That's not just a statement that has the word you in it. A you statement is when you are being critical directly about the person. So when you did this or when you did that, that is not effective. Use I statements. When I saw this being done, or when I saw the gestures that were made. Now, keep in mind that your evaluation is your opinion. Now, even though it is all about the speaker, as Solazar said, your evaluation is all about you and how the speaker made you feel, how what you heard from the speaker. So, next slide, please. So I keep in mind the speaker's goals, which you've talked about beforehand, right? Can't say that enough. It's important when you're evaluating a speech to have in mind what the goal is, because if you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you get there? Make your positive feedback specific. That's something that's very important. It's not helpful to the speaker that says, well, I like your gestures. Instead, be specific. Like when you made this movement with your hand to emphasize your point, then it particularly was effective. Or when you dropped your voice at this particular point, it really brought out the emotions instead of just saying, well, I like your vocal variety. So positive feedback, make it as specific as possible. Why? Because that helps the speaker the most when it comes to helping them reinforce what they're already doing well. And furthermore, your suggestions to be specific. So that instead of saying, well, it wasn't particularly effective when you made this gesture, you might say, well, I found that gesture to be a little bit distracting. If you want to emphasize the point, try doing it like this. Or I would suggest this might make it more effective. Again, concrete examples wherever possible. And now, oh yeah, next slide, please. It's important to understand that you're evaluating the speech and not the person. Now, this sometimes comes up that the speaker may be expressing an opinion or making a point that you agree or disagree, that you may disagree with. Avoid that in your evaluation. In fact, avoid even saying whether you agree or disagree with the message. That isn't the point of evaluations. Your whole point is to help the speaker take the next step in their progress. You might have an opinion about the speaker itself. I mean, we're all human beings. You may admire the speaker out the wazoo, or maybe maybe you think, well, I don't know about this guy. That has nothing to do with any of this. In Toastmasters, we are all about helping one another, regardless of what we think. So if you have an opinion of the speaker, keep that one to yourself. How can we help the speaker take the next step in their progress towards being a better communicator and a better leader? Keep in mind where the speaker is in their Toastmasters journey. If they're a relatively new speaker, you don't want to be giving them evaluation tips that are more advanced. Keep in mind exactly where they are and give your feedback a context in which, again, will help them take the very next step. So evaluation is an important tool that we use in Toastmasters, and we also use it to promote the self-esteem of our members. And now Diane Baer is going to share how to do that. Welcome, Diane.
Thanks, Arnie. As evaluators, there are several things that we can do to help a speaker. And one is promoting their self-esteem. What is self-esteem? Self-esteem is the speaker's confidence about their own self-worth or their abilities. It comes from their life experience and also from interactions with other people. We promote their self-esteem when we offer sincere praise and constructive suggestions, as we've been talking about. We can motivate and inspire a speaker by just encouraging them to keep going, deliver another speech. We want to see what you're going to do next. We can't wait. It's just positive feedback that we can give them to keep on going, keep speaking, and we can help them do better and improve. Next slide. There are other ways we can help them with their self-esteem. For example, we can encourage the speaker. If we're speaking genuinely from the first person, from my point of view, this is my feedback. And you give your observations of what are their strengths. You've seen that on the Pathways evaluation form. What are their strengths? Comment on them. They need to hear that. For example, did they take a risk with a difficult topic, using humor, making themselves vulnerable? That's a hard one. Was their speech really well organized and exceptionally clear? Or, for example, did they use great vocal variety, make great use of gestures or pauses? Next slide. We can also motivate the speaker by focusing on positive. Start on the positive and end on a positive note. Be honest, yet tactful. Now that's easier said than done, but it's something to work on. Besides the positive, we shouldn't avoid the tough topics on what they can improve, what they could do better next time. At the same time, don't overemphasize their flaws, and don't give them undue flattery, whitewashing. Just try and be real. Honesty is the best policy, honestly. Challenge the speaker. That's another point on your Pathways evaluation form. How can you challenge them to do better next time? Give them specific, concrete examples and suggestions, as we've already talked about. What could they do differently next time? Next slide. So our goal as an evaluator is to motivate and inspire the speaker, to give an evaluation that keeps the speaker's self-esteem intact, and provide constructive feedback that helps them grow. Our intention to promote self-esteem through evaluation will not be a success unless we know how to prepare and deliver a speech evaluation. And for that, Arnie Buss will now explain that particular portion of the evaluation process. Back to Arnie.
Thank you, Diane. Now, the challenging thing about an evaluation is that it has all of the elements of a prepared speech and of table topics, because you can't prepare what you're going to say beforehand, or can you? Well, how can you do the best job as in setting yourself up for success and setting the speaker up for getting the best feedback? And that's preparation. So what kind of preparation can you do? Well, you don't want to write the evaluation ahead of time unless you're in a backwards meeting, but that's another story. Prepare for the evaluation by, well, read the project, as Solazar said. Each Pathways project has a very extensive set of text and even videos that describe the project. The more you can do about that, the better. And if you have done that project before, then that can be quick review. The evaluation guide is particularly useful because the evaluation guide gives a focus on what the purpose of that project is. Now, one of the things about a speech is that it's important to have a purpose. And there are four main purposes. There is to educate, to inspire, to motivate, or to entertain. And so discerning which one of those four the speech is doing is important as far as the evaluation goes. As Solazar also mentioned, to talk with the speaker beforehand in terms of what their specific goals are. Now, the delivery of an evaluation is like a speech. Ideally, it's structured just like a speech. It has a clear opening, a body, and a conclusion. Keeping in mind that you're giving your personal opinion in a friendly, direct, non-threatening manner with the purpose of motivating the speaker to improve, to reinforce the things they're already doing well, and to take the next step on their journey. Next slide, please. As Diane mentioned, we want to motivate the speaker as much as possible. And one of the best ways you can do that is to, in your conclusion. The conclusion is what sends, in a speech, the conclusion is what sends the audience home and really motivates them to take what you've given and incorporate it. Likewise, with an evaluation, your conclusion is a big part of what helps motivate that speaker to continue, or if it's not done so effectively, it might even be a little demotivating. So make sure that in your evaluation that you conclude by motivating the speaker to move on. Now, evaluation is about offering feedback as well as advice. And now Tatiana Margolina will clarify the difference between feedback and advice when giving an evaluation. Let's welcome Tatiana.
Thank you so much, Arnie. Before I will try to put what we just heard into this framework of feedback versus advice, I have a question to you. Imagine that you're a speaker and someone is going to evaluate your speech right now. You have a choice. You only can choose one thing, feedback or advice, and you need to choose wisely. By show of hands, who would prefer feedback? What about advice? So. When I was reflecting on this question myself, I realized that when I'm an evaluator, I actually cannot wait by share my precious advice. But when I am a speaker, the thing I'm looking forward to is an honest personal opinion personal observation of how my speech was perceived by others. Next slide, please. Toastmasters International, in their Pathways Evaluation Project, specifically states that most Toastmasters evaluations are based primarily on feedback. I will try to answer 3 questions. What is the difference between feedback and advice? Why feedback is so important? And if there is a place in Toastmaster evaluation for a valuable piece of advice. Next slide, please, Salazar. The definition is very simple. When we think about feedback, this is an observation. I had difficulty hearing you. I hope you're not having difficulty hearing me right now. Advice is an opinion. You have to speak up. This is probably the worst example of an advice. Not only an opinion, very generalized, but also not specific. Can we please go forward, Salazar? One step back. Thank you. Now I have a question to you again. You should improve your eye contact. Is it feedback or advice? You can unmute yourself and just tell me. What do you think? You should improve.
Advice.
Advice.
This is
Advice.
advice. Perfect. Can we please go forward, Salazar? You use different tones throughout your speech. Is it feedback?
Feedback.
Feedback.
How many people think this is a feedback? How many people would want to hear it said in a little bit different manner? All right, let's look for some details. Forward, please, Salazar. I will try to refine the definition of feedback as an observation and advice as an opinion. Both of them, feedback and advice, are supposed to be very specific and very direct. As Arnie pointed to us, feedback should use I statements. I heard that you have changed your tone from very soft one when you were talking about your daughter to very straightforward when you gave us some information about parenting. And it should be actionable. I can give you a very personal example. If someone would tell me, Tatiana, I heard that you have an accent. Well, yes, I do. And I'm going to have it for the rest of my life. What I am interested in is to hear if it was hard or easy to understand what I was saying. How was my pronunciation? How can I improve it? That's an actionable feedback. And we already heard that you don't want to whitewash in our evaluation. This is completely useless, and this is a generalization in itself. And it shouldn't be a laundry list of errors. You did this, you did that, you did this, you didn't do that. I use the word should. It actually is very hard, a word which is very hard to avoid. You will see in my second part when I talk about the advice. Advice also should be very specific and direct. I think that when we give a piece of advice, it should be preceded by specific and direct feedback. This is a substantiation, why we even suggest to do something differently. And it also needs to be personal and humble. No matter how much experience we have in Toastmasters, we are speakers, we are not a professor and a student. We learn from each other, whether we 1 year in Toastmasters, or I'm not saying how long Carl has been in Toastmaster right now. 58, right, Carl? Probably. And of course, we shouldn't use the word should in our evaluation. Or our evaluation must, we must to find some other way to tell the speaker how they must to change the thing, the way they're doing the speeches. when I give an evaluation, I try not to be too excessive in giving my pieces of advice. There is always an opportunity to talk to the speaker after the meeting. Next slide, please, Salazar. When we give an evaluation during the meeting, we apply the approach which is widely used in workforce environment, tell and sell approach, when the evaluator talks and the speaker listens. This is the most time efficient approach to give an evaluation, and we all as Toastmasters know that we try to use our time wisely. It also allows the speaker to focus on the evaluation instead of trying to find the way to argue with the evaluator. There are very important conditions which we need to meet for this approach to work. There should be mutual trust between the speaker and the evaluator, and I believe that the club mission, the Toastmaster Club mission, support this trust in the Toastmaster environment. There should be mutual respect. The speaker needs to trust and believe and respect the evaluator, the same way the evaluator, again, no matter how experienced, should be respectful of the speaker. It is also very important to align experienced speakers with experienced evaluators and let new members to learn before they are ready to evaluate other speakers. The next slide, please. This is not the only approach we can use in Toastmasters. Tell and listen approach, when the evaluator talks and the speaker is given an opportunity to respond after the meeting, for example, or in an advanced club like the Peninsula Pros Toastmasters. After each round robin evaluation for a speaker, the speaker is given an opportunity to respond. I really like the two-way dialogue between the evaluator and speaker, which is possible in the mentoring environment. This is also an opportunity to evaluate. Next slide, please. And finally, a few words about how we structure an evaluation. As Arnie mentioned, an evaluation is probably the most challenging type of speeches we give in Toastmasters. It's an impromptu speech, it's an organized speech, a usual speech, and we give it for the benefit of another member. So we need to be effective and efficient. As any speech, it should have an opening. Oops, I'm here. An opening, body, and conclusion. The way you structure the body of your evaluation depends on your favorite approach. Just briefly touch on the three methods which are usually applied in Toastmasters. Next slide, please, Salazar. Organizational method. I personally think about it as a lasagna method. You can give feedback to Toastmaster, to the speaker, about the opening, body, and conclusion of the speech, reflecting on both strengths and suggestions for the improvement. Next slide, please, Salazar. This is probably the one everyone have heard about, the sandwich method. I also heard someone called it the Oreo cookie method. The idea here is that we open with some positives, then provide opportunities for improvement, and something new in pathways, which I really like, provide some challenges. And challenge can be to improve on something or try something new. Next slide, please, Salazar. And finally, something which is called evaluator's mantra. This is probably the most difficult approach to apply because we don't have much time to prepare this kind of evaluation usually, but with experience, this is possible to implement even during regular meetings in Toastmasters. It's a very natural way of giving effective evaluation because you can talk about your perception of the speech. You can talk about what you saw, what you heard, and how you felt during the speech. The next slide, please. And we will now hear from Carl about how to present the evaluation. Carl?
Okay, now can everybody hear me? I muted myself. All right. Now, some of the words you see on the slide sounds like what Tatiana's been talking about, what Arnie talked about, Diane, and to a great degree, that's true. You've all had a different way of looking at this, and I'm going to hopefully give you some ideas that I have along the same line. Now, first of all, this was mentioned, I think, by Solazar at the very beginning. When you give an evaluation, you need to really understand what it is you're evaluating. And so to do that, you need to find out ahead of time, is this a pathway speech? What is the purpose of the assignment? And even beyond that, what is the purpose of the speech? Talk to the evaluator ahead of time, find out exactly what assignment they are on and what they're expected to do in the context of the speech, and then you can evaluate it accordingly. So what are the objectives? What the speaker, from the speaker, what is his or her objectives for the speech? Is it to sell something? Is it to convince you of something? Is it to inform or entertain, as Arnie mentioned earlier? You need to know that right up front. And because that's one of the first things you're going to talk about. When you get to the opening, you know, you've been sitting there all meeting, writing things down and trying to put this together, and now you're called up to the lectern and you're actually going to have to present your evaluation. So first thing you would want to acknowledge is what the assignment was and pathways, and what the purpose of the objectives of the speech were. And because if you don't do that, then you're going to lose the value of the evaluation as far as the other people listening to what you have to say. Excuse me. So in the opening of your evaluation, you probably want to comment on how did the speaker get your attention? What did he or she do to get you to listen to what they had to say? Did the speaker tell you what the speech was going to be all about in his or her introduction? And if they haven't, then this needs to be mentioned, because that's what the speaker needs to do to improve it, is to let everybody know what the objectives of the speech and what the speech is going to be about. And then you can continue your evaluation accordingly, knowing that and referring back to that. So when you through in the opening of your evaluation, you get into the body. Tatiana had a lot of thoughts there of different ways you could do it. But a couple of things that didn't really come out, I think, is, you know, how were the main points of the speech organized? Was it a chronological speech? An icebreaker might be a chronological, as far as, you know, in terms of time. You were born at a certain time, you grew up, etc., etc. That's a different type of speech than where you're just trying to organize your points. But you have to let the speaker know how well they did in organizing it, because the speech wasn't organized very well. The message probably didn't get across. And that's what you need to look for as an evaluator. And how did the speaker support his or her main points? And there are different ways of doing that, through example, through body motion, perhaps, or through just a description of the situation. That'll come out in the course of the speech, and that's what you would comment on. And finally, in conclusion, did the speaker summarize the main points of his speech? If the speaker started off by saying, in conclusion, that's actually a red flag. I never let that one go. Conclusion should speak for itself. And by summarizing the main points of his or her speech, then it'll be done in that way. And what was the overall message delivered by the speech? The speaker obviously had a message that he or she wanted to convey. And whoops, no, you can go back to my original slide. Thank you. I only have one slide. Or the overall message delivered by the speech. There's a couple of other things I want to add here as I thought about evaluations that I have given. sometimes you have an opportunity to give an example during the speech of what the speaker could have done better. There was a comment made about vocal variety back, and statement of, well, you should have spoken louder. Well, maybe you could give an example. When making this point, Mr. Speaker and Madam Speaker, if you had brought up your voice to specifically bring out the point that you were making, it would have been more effective and would have been more received by the audience. So anytime you can give an example of what you might do, to what the speaker might do to do it better, don't be afraid to do that. And then at the end of the evaluation, and it's not on the slide here, but it occurred to me because every time I evaluate a speech, I try to use the Pathways evaluation form for that speech. And as you all know, 90% of the form is the same no matter what speech you're given. But three things at the end, if you do nothing else, you should comment on. And the first thing is an example of you excelled at a certain thing. And the second thing is you could have done better with a certain thing. And then the third is to challenge yourself. You might try doing such and such. And there have been times when I've become an evaluator at the last minute. I haven't had a chance to talk to the speaker. And at least I have those three things to fall back on at the end to comment on. So basically, if you just stick with the program and pay attention to what's on the evaluation form, you'll be able to help the speaker well. Okay, I'm now going to return control to Salazar because he's going to set up the next part of the program here today. Right?
All right, thank you, Carl. So we've got a guest speaker this evening, and he's going to have to leave probably before all the evaluations are done. But we want to thank him for being a part of our presentation this evening. So I'm going to introduce him right now, Jimit Raja, Sir Strong. Jimit Raja, Sir Strong. Jimit, all yours, sir.
I see my audience and I see glory. Each one of you have a unique story. Stories of achievements, big and small, but unsaid are the stories of the fall. In laurels of triumph, defeats don't belong, but low notes are needed to sing a song. Stories of struggles are not at all wrong. Let me tell you one such of Sir Strong. Let me tell you one such of Sir Strong. Sir Strong was a legendary knight. Everyone in the kingdom knew of his might. He wore an armor shining bright, and Sir Strong never lost a fight. And Sir Strong never lost a fight. A man of honor, chivalrous but proud, envy of thousands without a doubt. In the king's tourney, he put on a show until he met a formidable foe. Until he met a formidable foe. The enemy's sword hit below the elbow. Sir Strong said, "'Tis but a scratch." He was in pain, but he didn't let it show. Through sheer will, he won the match. As the days passed, the agony grew. Sir Strong the stubborn just fought through. Didn't even take off his armor to view. Had the wound festered, he never knew. Things got so worse for the great knight. He couldn't train, he couldn't fight. Things got so worse for the great knight. He couldn't train, he couldn't fight. Along came a healer, solemn and wise. Something is wrong, he did surmise. He asked the knight what had gone wrong. "I'm quite all right," said Sir Strong. "Weary gait, broken side, bloodshot eyes. Knight, you're hurt, said the old man wise. Knight, you're hurt, said the old man wise. Armor removed, and he winced in pain. Oh, my ribs, did the knight complain. With all his knowledge, the healer assessed. Wound rest, some rest, knight ready to contest. Wound rest, some rest, knights ready to contest. Let me tell you a secret of my own. Yashvi sir strong, Yashvi sir strong. There's a dark side to raising a firstborn. Amidst the happiness, you feel forlorn. With a child who didn't know day from night, we had to fight sleep and couldn't eat right. Had to find strength through sheer resolve to fulfill responsibilities we couldn't devolve. Had to find strength through sheer resolve to fulfill the responsibilities we couldn't devolve. At last, the puny human broke my wife. I didn't sign up for a mother's life, but there was no way out. We had to endure. So I donned the armor, eternally unsure. I donned the armor, eternally unsure. Indeed, we can raise a baby. Why can't we? It's just a matter of days, you will see. Pretended to be okay to boost her morale. Carried a silent burden, hid all thoughts mal. As the days passed, the agony grew. My shoulders felt heavy. I couldn't pull through. Along came a therapist, solemn and wise. She heard my plight and gave great advice. Get rid of the armor, O noble one. Lay your mind bare. Don't your pain shun. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to cry. Less strong are those who keep their cheeks dry. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to cry. Less strong are those who keep their cheeks dry. Unburdened, unfettered, rejuvenated I became. Realized my folly, that my pretense was in vain. To support others, you don't have to be strong. Just share their burden. Give a hug long. Each of us have been broken once or twice and have been mended by sound advice. If you're broken today, don't lose hope. There will be someone to help you cope. If you're broken today, don't lose hope. There will be someone to help you cope. Health of the mind needs ample attention. No brain can function under extreme tension. Don't leave your wounds open, lest they fester. Pour your pain in the right receptor. Don't leave your wounds open, lest they fester. Pour your pain in the right receptor. Yashvis are strong, Tuves are strong, and we've needed healers all along. Yashvis are strong, Tuves are strong, and we have needed healers all along. Back to you, sir, Toastmaster.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you so much for that presentation. Thank you very, very much. Now, I want to let people know what's going to happen now. We're going to have 3 evaluators, and I'm going to jump forward here. And each evaluator will be evaluated by someone from Peninsula Pros. Whoop. Let's skip that. There we go. So we're going to have evaluator 1 will be evaluated by Carrie Glenn when we're done with the evaluations. Evaluator 2 will be evaluated by Arnie Buss. And evaluator 3 will be evaluated by Carl Thormeyer. So to get us started, I'm evaluator 1. So I will be evaluating Jimit first. So, Jimit, once again, thank you for that presentation. I always find that doing poetry is a very challenging proposition for us, but I wish we would do more of it. We actually used to have a interpretive reading contest, and a lot of times that was poetry or different things. There's a lot we can learn through the use of language as well as the incorporation of gestures in our presentation. So let me tell you some of the things that I saw, I heard, and I felt from your presentation. One, you took mastery of the screen right away. You understood where you were, where your placement was, and you took that control. Your original and initial words were very strong coming out, and you got us initially. Now, I have to admit, when I was listening, I wasn't sure if you were giving us poetry as an opening or poetry all the way through, but I did hear your poetry all the way through. And I have some things I'd like to share with you. One, I give you kudos all the way for actually attempting a poem that long all the way through. There were times your eyes dipped down a little bit because I think you were checking your notes, but for the most part, you did a masterful job of presenting the poetry in a very clear and effective way. I would have liked a little more pause, however, especially on the repetition of the lines. There were times when you said, he couldn't train, he couldn't fight. And I would have liked the pause, he couldn't train, he couldn't fight, as you went into the repetition of the lines, because that would have given me a little bit more of a punctuation in terms of what you were saying and doing. And you also had a wonderful combination of gestures. Some were extremely effective, but I would have liked to have seen from me a little more about when you couldn't cry, to kind of emphasize those points. There were times when the gestures were very coherent, and there were times when they were just gestures. So when we're doing a poem, everything that we're doing is about presenting the poetry to us, and it's the words themselves. I would have liked the conclusion to slow up a little bit. Don't leave your wounds, and you're so strong. Don't leave your wounds. But when you came back to that, I would have liked you to slow up the conclusion, because the conclusion was the full punctuation of the entire poem. Wonderfully done in terms of presenting a poem. That's a very courageous thing to do. I give you a lot of credit for that. You've obviously practiced it well and it came through. I would have liked a little bit more pausing as the repetitive phrases were used to really sell that. And I would have liked some of the gestures to be more coherent when you went to the heart, when you went to the wounded or the pain, not like this. I would have liked it a little more coherent with the idea of wounding and pain. But I thank you so much for taking your time on this early morning to present this to us. Now I will give it back to me. And then we'll go to our next evaluator. Our next evaluator is joining us from Hong Kong, as I understand. Is that correct, Jim? There you are. Jim, your turn, sir.
Thank you. You caught my attention straight from the start, which was very good. Like a knight in shining armor, you stood center stage and you presented. You had a very good pace. I could follow along. And I really appreciate the great effort you put into creating such a rhyming story. I did feel like it was a recital. You were reciting a story. Therefore, I didn't feel any authenticity. I felt detached. You had, all the way through, you had some lines that you repeated twice. And that really hit home as something quite inauthentic. A person wouldn't speak that way. And some of the phrasing of the poetry made it a little bit difficult for me to follow. For example, you said, old man wise. So is his name Wise, Old Man Wise, or is he a wise person who's an old man? Because of the phrasing, it was hard to catch that. I did say that I like your pausing, but those rhythms you have to nail in order for me anyway, to get a clearer picture of what you were saying. You had gestures all the way through. I felt attacked when you gave this gesture, though. I don't like being pointed at. It just did something for me there. So perhaps you might consider more general gestures. And overall, I like the message. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to cry. You don't have to be strong to help someone. I was listening very intently in order to get that message. We were coming to the end and I thought, well, what's the purpose of this speech? And I caught it. It didn't really stand out. I don't think I would have caught it had I just listened casually. So perhaps the phrasing, lengthening some of those pauses for emphasis would have made that message very, very clear. Overall, I really appreciate the effort that you put into having this rhyming story about a white knight or a knight in shining armor. Who doesn't like a knight in shining armor story? Just if you do the phrasing a bit more carefully, that message would come through. Back to you, Salazar.
Thank you so very much, Jim. I really appreciate that. And now, our third evaluator is our very own Division E Director, Jamal George. All yours, Jamal.
Thank you, Salazar. Jimith, poetry at the best. Sir Strong serves strong. I just loved the way you put all the words together and just gave us poetry tonight. Thank you so much, Jimith. What I loved about your speech were the rhyming words. You used glory, story. It's just amazing at how you came up with the words and it just rhymes. I wish I could do that. I loved how you added personal story in the second half. I believe you mentioned something about you and your wife having a child. And that's where I caught my attention. I want to hear more about it. So you added personal story as well. I liked when you repeated the phrases to catch our attention. So that was wonderfully done. To take your speech to the next level, I would ask you to share an introduction to the Toastmaster so we know what to expect. I felt the words were spoken, but they didn't have feelings. They didn't have meaning to me. I would like you to share feelings. I want you to feel the words so they come out with feelings and we can feel it. I want to challenge you by first starting off with a poem and then sharing a story. So in that way, we can have that connection. And when it comes to conclusion, I wasn't able to catch your conclusion. So I lost the words. One more thing was clarity. Some of the words were all mushed together that they were not clear. The words, I couldn't tell the difference between one word and another word. So they just were all mushed together. Maybe it's my speaker. I just couldn't hear the words well. To summarize, I just loved the way you set the poem tonight. It helps me understand the creative side and how to put the words together and say a 5 to 7 minute speech. So you just helped me to see things at a different level. So thank you for that. To summarize, I would say share an introduction to the Toastmaster. Make sure the words have feelings so that we can also feel it. Challenge yourself in sharing a story. Poem in the top and then share a story. And bring clarity by making sure that the words don't mush together. What I loved about your speech was the words that you chose and the rhyming, your personal story, and the phrases that you repeated. Serve strong, serve strong. And I look forward to hearing more such stories from you. Back to you.
Wonderfully done. Thank you, Jamal. So now to evaluate me, our very own Carrie Glenn, to evaluate that first evaluator.
Thank you, Salazar. If I had been sitting in the speaker's seat, just listening to your opening of your evaluation would have made me feel completely relaxed and like I was in a trustworthy hands. That's the immediate feeling that I got as you started your evaluation, which I think goes a long way to making the speaker then be very open to what now you're going to have to say. You gave him props for doing a poem and really didn't just say like, hey, I love that, but you really gave him specific props for that. And I love that. I saw a lot of hand gestures, which I thought was great. And the voice on had to admit, I don't remember exactly what you had said there, but something about had to admit, the voice that you used, the inflection in your voice was really effective in that moment. And then I loved how you offered a tad bit of advice with the crying, where you showed him an idea for using his gestures to have that point stand out more effectively in his poem. Just a couple of things to suggest, because it's very hard to find things to suggest here. Oh, wow, I'm evaluating Salazar. A couple of times the gestures kind of dropped out of the bottom of the frame. So just keep them up or let them fall all the way down. So kind of hanging here is something that's easily avoided and makes the, your whole box nice and clear and clean as you give your evaluation. And the other is, let's see, well, that you gave valuable feedback on the pausing. So I guess that was the big suggestion. Because you also gave very valuable feedback on pausing. I'm going to give you a challenge. I'm going to give you two challenges though. The first is, as you did the sandwich method, and actually it was more of the how I see or how I felt, but you did conclude, you gave suggestions and then you came back to a couple of compliments, but in that conclusion which is the other part of it, you gave two last ideas for feedback. And so I'm thinking maybe you had already given those ideas for feedback, let them rest and just stick with that compliment at the very end. The other challenge is a big one, and I actually just started to do it and had to correct myself. When we give a suggestion or a feedback that is a suggestive feedback, sometimes we'll say, I really liked how I saw XYZ, but I'd really love to see Z get twisted up just a little bit more. What happens when we use the word but to introduce the suggestion is it kind of negates the sentence before. So that's my big challenge for you, is just cut that but out. And I did notice that in a couple of other evaluation moments, not just with you as well. So it's, it's a common thing. But again, you complimented him. You were clear, your feedback was direct, and it was given in a warm and friendly voice, a tone, leaning forward, full attention. And I think anyone watching can see that this was definitely just a top-notch evaluation. Hats off to you, Salazar. Back to you.
Thank you, Terry, and I'll watch my butt. So our next evaluator, Jim, will be evaluated by Arnie Buss. Arnie, you are up, sir.
Thank you, Salazar. Jim, and I very much appreciate you coming to us from around the globe, Hong Kong, if I understand. I'm going to talk about some things I thought your evaluation did particularly well. I'm going to offer a few suggestions and a challenge. I thought your opening was very strong as far as an evaluation goes, because as a speech, it got my attention. I like how you, when you said, I appreciate the effort, and I thought that was a particularly good way of giving the speaker some feedback while prepping him for some suggestions. I like your suggestion about the way that it was spoken as far as the recital goes. See, poetry there's a special voice that's ideally used in poetry, and it's not, you pointed out, kind of a recital or sing-songy. So I might have suggested that it sounded a little bit like a Dr. Seuss book. I would have given an example of an alternative way to speak rather than the couplets, because doing the rhyming couplets is not the most effective way to give poetry. I liked how you gave positive feedback about the pausing. One thing, now, when you said I felt attacked when the finger was pointed, that was effective because you were talking about your reaction. My suggestion on that is to use the Clinton fist, because evidently Bill Clinton used to do that, and he got feedback, says, no, don't point at people. And so what he did was he kind of just did this with the thumb. Just another possible suggestion. Finally, I heard this evaluation end with a suggestion. There was one last positive feedback, but then the suggestion was the last thing. I would think for me, a more effective evaluation would be give that last suggestion and then end with a positive feedback. So my challenge is, when giving suggestions, to give specific examples rather than just say that this was less effective. Overall, I found your speech to be an effective evaluation as a mix of both positive feedback as well as suggestions for improvement. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster Salazar.
Thank you so very much, Arnie. Wonderful ideas. And now to evaluate Jamal, our competent closer, will be our very own Carl Thormeyer. Carl?
Well, thank you, Salazar, and Jamal, thank you for that wonderful evaluation. It was a hard speech to evaluate. It took a lot of listening and paying attention to it. It was clear right from the start that you had listened to the speech and had paid attention to the flow of the speech and the way it was presented. That was very important because it helped you make the points that you wanted to make. I personally actually took notes on the speech itself, because one of the things I like to do when I'm generally evaluated is take notes on the speech of things that I might have said, and then see if the evaluators agree with me or not. And actually, virtually everything that I had down is pluses. I think you covered very, very well. I had a hard time finding anything negative about your evaluation, but there's a couple of things that I thought were very positive that people can learn from. And first of all, you brought up, not at the very beginning, but shortly after that, you brought up the fact that the speaker really hadn't let us know what the purpose of the speech was, or what manual assignment or whatever, and you suggested that you get together with the Toastmaster ahead of time to figure that out. I thought that was a very appropriate and kind way of getting that message across. And so kudos on that one. Similarly, at the end, the typical Toastmasters Pathways end of the speech where you give an example of you excelled at, you could improve by, and to challenge yourself. You started working that in before I thought you needed to, because you wrapped it up at the end. You had it all wrapped up, but you essentially repeated what you had said earlier. So I think you took a little extra time that maybe you could have used for other constructive comments, talking about those features earlier in the evaluation. I would have left that, just wrap it up at the end. That's the way I would have done it. I thought you were, let's see. I can't even read my own writing here. You pointed out that the speaker was strong, or you were strong right off the bat yourself with your evaluation and describing how the speaker started off. So overall, I thought the flow of your evaluation was good, except for repetitive things from occasionally. Got the message across that you needed to evaluate from. Didn't really comment on the poetry as poetry. You used other words in there. You effectively talked about his delivery, but his the poetry. You didn't make a big deal of the fact that it was a poem, and that's fine. Not everybody accepts poetry in the same way. So all in all, I'd be proud to have you come to our club and do an evaluation. Good job, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for jumping in and doing that, everyone. And thank you, of course, to Jim, who had to leave on his way to work this morning. To take us through our summary of going forward, let's go back to Diane Bear to hear some additional summary of what we've been discussing.
Thank you. Let's look at what we heard tonight and expand it a little further with some do's and do nots. So first of all, when you're speaking only for yourself. You're giving an opinion. You're giving only your opinion and not speaking on behalf of the audience. You want to avoid saying things like, we think, we believe, the audience would have, or the audience didn't understand. Remember, it's about you. Avoid words that imply you're speaking on behalf of the audience. Next slide. You want to avoid impersonal statements that imply someone other than you is giving the evaluation, or that it's directed to someone other than the speaker. Such vague things like, they say, one must, people are. These are vague references that sound great in an essay, but not in a speech evaluation. Next slide. Avoid judgment words and phrases like, good leaders don't. That was the wrong way to say it. If you want to do it right, you must do this. You did, you were. Just sounds so accusatory. Next slide. Use words that describe your own reactions to the speaker. I was impressed with. I was confused about. When I heard this, or I think the speech's purpose would have been clearer if you did this. I liked it when you did that. Next slide. Don't repeat a point once you've made it. It can sound like nagging if you keep harping on it. And avoid words like never and always. They're always good to avoid. Don't ever, never say them. Yes. These detract from your message. Next slide. Remember, there are the 3 evaluation styles or methods we've talked about tonight. The evaluator's mantra, I saw, I heard, and I felt. The sandwich method, or I like to call it the Oreo method because it sounds so yummy. What's good, what needs to be improved, and end on good. And the organizational method, which focuses on framing it in the open body and close and tying it all together with a nice little ribbon. Next slide. And I hand it back to Solazar.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for the members of Peninsula Pros. For everyone who's here, Any questions? Jim, you participated, as did Jamal. Do you have any questions you would like to ask back? We want to thank you for your participation as well.
Giving examples, I've been accused of rewriting the speaker's speech by not giving an example of how he could end it with a strong and sticky message, which just happened to come to me. So how do I do that? How do I give him the suggestion without it sounding like I'm rewriting his speech?
Well, I would ask you, can you give an example of how you've said something that you've been accused of rewriting a speech?
Yeah, he had a speech about his parents. So I said, as you come to the end, you could do this and you could do that. And the message at the end is young or old, we are all, whatever the message was.
I don't know. Does anyone have an idea? I'm going to make one comment, Jim, is that I think for each of us receiving feedback, we have to remember feedback or advice, we have to remember that we can receive it and accept it, or we can ignore it. But if you're giving me your feedback, I either accept it or I don't. I'm not sure that there's an appropriate way to not rewrite a speech per se, unless you were doing the things we spoke about earlier. You should, you must, I think you have to do this in order to be better. If you're not doing those things, I don't know that there's a direct answer to your question. Arnie, you want to add something?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if, and in my feedback, I was suggesting more specific suggestions. I think when they have to do more with the way in which the speech was delivered and less about the content, there's likely to be less of a pushback on that. So if it's about how the speech was ended rather than what the content was. So if you're talking about the content, then that is going to come across as kind of rewriting. On the other hand, without rewriting content, but maybe kind of just a little more, a little less toward what the words were, I think will probably land a little bit more easily for the speaker.
Tatiana, you looked like you had something to add.
Yes, I just have a suggestion. I cannot help but give advice. My suggestion would be, sometimes it's very hard. We want to help, right? We want the speaker to do even better than they did. And sometimes it's more of a coaching as opposed to evaluating. And if this is the case, I would talk to the speaker after the meeting and offer my help with preparation, maybe for the next speech, or explaining how you felt that you wanted to hear this. So that would be my criteria. Is it the coaching or it's evaluation, like what I heard, what I saw, and what I felt? But
Carl,
speakers would appreciate it, I'm sure about it. Back to you, Salazar.
Oh, Carl wanted to add
I was
something.
just going to suggest that if you have that situation when you're doing an evaluation, kind of let people know at the beginning, I'm going to say something here that my opinion, and it's an idea that I had that might make the speech better. Keep in mind that it's just one person's thought, and then go on and do it. And then that'll give the audience the authority, if you will, to ignore you if they choose to.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Carrie.
Oh.
I'll come to you next year.
I think that's a good one there. The telling them it's coming from your own opinion. And to piggyback off of what everyone kind of has said, I think when we have a great suggestion, or what we think is a great suggestion, if you kind of combine what we're all saying and say something to the effect of, at the ending, I felt like I could have had a little bit more, and there might be something in the content that could help. And after the evaluation, if if you want to hear more about that, I can give you some ideas. But whatever you do, just something is missing at the end. So if you did it in a kind of roundabout way like that, like something was missing for you, you have an idea, you're willing to share later, then they can come up to you if they want to. And they're asking you for the advice at that point rather than telling them, because people get funny about their writing. It's their baby. And often they don't like suggestions.
Jamal, you wanted to add something in as well.
Yeah, I want to say is Jimith is on the call. I would love to hear from him. How did he come up with this topic, and what is his takeaway from today's evaluation?
Thank you, Jaimal. I wanted to say that the feedback that I received on this before was not helpful, in the sense that it was a little bit of flattery, because when I say that I am reciting a poem, right, people don't think about what happened inside the poem. They appreciate the effort of writing a poem and speaking it out, right? But today I got critical feedback, and that's what I wanted to hear. What I was doing wrong, right? And so that's why I jumped at the opportunity to have 3 evaluations of my speech. And this opened my eyes on how I could do better in reciting a poem.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for doing that. Let's go back to Jim for a minute. Jim, do you feel you got some information that was helpful for you in considering your question?
Yes, thanks.
And I think what you should do, and in order to do it.
Always.
All right, Susan, you said, oh, go ahead, Arnie.
Oh, I have one more comment about advice, and this is something that I have always taken to heart, and it's to remember the great philosopher Socrates, who was a very smart man who went around giving everybody great advice. They killed him.
Susan, you said you were still learning about evaluation, and did you pick up any tips tonight that you think would help you in trying an evaluation at your club?
Thank you, Salazar. Yes, definitely. I thought tonight's meeting and seminar was really helpful in many ways. It was helpful to have the slide deck at the beginning and see the roadmap of where the evening was going. And I took copious notes on all the information, which I really appreciate. I have seen evaluations done at my club, but it was never delineated in a way like the way it was tonight, where I saw there were 3 methods that you can use. It could be the sandwich method, it could be the mantra method, or the kind of the organizational method. And I also thought it was really helpful with how meta it was. So we heard a speech, we heard separate evaluations, and then this was a really fun part. We heard evaluations of the evaluators, and it was just so many layers, and there were so many good takeaways from that. I wrote in my notes that all speeches fall into categories. Is it educational? Is it to inspire, motivate? Is it to entertain? And I think those are really, that's a really helpful way to look at what I'm listening to when I give my first evaluation for the first time. And I wrote down sentence stems that I think I can bring into the meeting and have a bit of a roadmap to frame what I'm gonna say, because it's not a lot of minutes where you have to prepare this 2-minute evaluation speech. So sentence stems, like I saw, I heard, I think those are all really good takeaways that I can use for my club on Bayview. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for that feedback. Jim, I'll get to you in a second, but if everybody puts their email into the chat, we'll send you the slides, so you can have those to use as background notes. Jim, you had something you wanted to share or question, one of the two. Or maybe you just wanted to give me advice and tell me how to rewrite.
It's about clarity of speech versus accent and bad habits. So by bad habits, I mean uptalk and vocal fry. I'm an OCD, and the uptalk and the vocal fry really gets me. And I hold myself back from mentioning these bad habits. And it's quite incredible how infectious it is, because people with very poor English in my part of the world pick up these habits. You know, they can't speak English well, but they can do the vocal fry and the uptalk, and it detracts from the clarity. Is it something that I should comment on or just forget about it?
I don't know. Anybody have some input on that?
Forget about it. Sorry, I'm from Jersey.
I think it goes back to something that was said earlier, which really is, did I say it in a way, as Tatiana was talking, she's always going to have her accent, but did she try to get her message across to me? So give credit for that, not necessarily whether they used appropriate English. I'm from America and I use inappropriate English all the time. I will be quite clear about that.
Drives us crazy.
Yep.
What do you think, Tatiana, as someone who's
I
probably
think this is the first sign that they become very fluent in English. So I completely understand the very, very sensitive situation when you decide if you want to comment on it. I actually had a very interesting experience when I gave my speech, and then the evaluation, and I was really proud of how much progress I have made. And the evaluator gave me great evaluation, a lot of praise. And at the end, she said, "Unfortunately, we didn't understand half of the words you were saying." I almost left the club, honestly. But luckily, somebody offered help as a mentor. So for me, it was helpful. So I completely understand it's very hard to find a tactful way to provide feedback, but we need this feedback because otherwise, how we would know that we are making mistakes? Like that, I'm talking about myself.
Yeah. If I could offer a suggestion about how to give the feedback, to use some of the principles that they're talking about here. So with the uptalking, refer to how it impacted you. So it might be, when I hear a sentence raised at the end, it sounds like a question to me, and I'm wondering whether the intent was to ask a question or to make a statement.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's a good one. I notice sometimes when I mention it, people are saying, what are you on about? What's uptalk? It was quite good.
We have a guy in our club that should visit your club. Then his name's Fred Sadler.
Yeah. But people can't hear it. I mean, I remember in a slightly different context working with someone who was every sentence he way up at the end, and he could not hear it. We said, no, drop your voice. It went up every time. Couldn't hear it at all. But you're right. It is well. It gives the a questioning. In other words, it gives the impression that you're not entirely sure of what I'm speaking. I'm from America. Well, are you?
Only Australians should be allowed to talk.
So in the interest of concluding on time, we want to mention that Peninsula Prods meets the third Wednesday each month at 6 p.m. physically at Black Bear Diner in Monterey. You can contact our VPM, Terry Glenn, if you're interested in physically visiting us. Of course, Jim, that would be darn near impossible for you. Want to thank, but anytime you're in town, want to thank everyone for attending this evening. And should you have any questions, you can get them out to Diane or me or any of the members. You can even contact us through Abhijit. We'd be happy to share information with you. But we'd like you to go forth and evaluate. Thank you all.